So I'm going to run through my method for making a really good tomato sauce from canned tomatoes. In a previous video I used fresh tomatoes and used the canning method to put them in jars. So this is a very similar method and you end up with a close simulation of that sauce. So I'm going to open these 3 cans. Oftentimes at this time of year in October they go on sale. These are large sauce tomatoes, so likely Roma. If you can get San Marzano, it's even better. And I use an 18-quart electric roaster, so I encourage you to, if you can see these in the stores, to pick one up. They're not very expensive, and they're great for making large batches of sauce, broth, stock, chili, turkey. But they're really good because you don't have to tie up your oven, and you can do it in a separate part of the house as well. So you can see I'm doing this in my basement, not tying up the kitchen. And you can see the Roma tomatoes come along with some sauce in the can. So what we're going to do in the first stage is to cook the tomatoes for about 2 hours at 250 degrees Fahrenheit or 120 Celsius. So here I'm just kind of shaking the roaster to get them to settle, and switch it to 250 here. And after about 45 minutes I will take the lid off. And I encourage you to have a large slotted spoon like this. It's very handy to move product around. Oftentimes these roasters have the heating element along the side, and it tends to not necessarily burn at 250, but it will cook a little bit quicker along the side. So give it a stir once in a while. Don't open up your lid too often, but once in a while just check it. So after 2 hours at 250, this is what we end up with. And this is the next step, which is important. So you're going to take your slotted spoon, you could use a strainer as well, but you're going to transfer all the whole tomatoes and any little bits into a large bowl or 2 bowls, whatever you have on hand. And you can see these are nice tomatoes, they're nice and ripe, no peels. Oftentimes the cans advertise that they're pre-peeled. You will likely end up with a few peels here and there, which is not a problem because we're going to run this through a food mill in the next step. So yeah, this doesn't take very long. I mean, they're cooked and they're going to be easy to run through the food mill. There you can see a stray peel or a piece that's going to be processed. So just give it a good shake and kind of strain it out before you put it in the bowl. It's all going back in the roaster anyway, so don't worry about if some sauce gets into the bowl. Just strain most of it out. This doesn't take very long, probably 5 minutes. And you do one final pass through the remaining sauce in the roaster. You can keep your temperature at 250 while everything is going on. Don't turn it off because it'll have to start from scratch again, so just leave it at 250. Here you can see I have a large pot and a kind of old school strainer, food mill. You can do this in the blender as well. I like this method because it gives a nice chunky consistency depending on the size of the screen that you use. So obviously the finer screen, the more seeds you're going to end up leaving out of the sauce. I don't mind having seeds in my sauce, so the main goal here is to turn the whole tomato into the meat or the base of the sauce. So you can see there's not much left in the mill once you crank it. But yeah, you can run it through a blender as well. Just be careful, these are hot if you're using a blender, so don't overfill your blender. Okay, so this doesn't take, it takes another 5 minutes or so. And I just pour the rest in. The juice goes right through, and I process the rest of the whole tomatoes. And this is what you end up with. No large chunks and a pretty consistent sauce that's going to go back into the roaster. You can see it's already fairly thick. So you're going to add it back to the thin sauce that was already in the roaster, and the temperature is still at 250. And I'm going to run a spoon through the mixture to combine what you've just added with the existing sauce. And right now it's not really at the consistency that I like it to be. So you'll see I bake it for another 3 hours, but in the meantime I do add a bit of salt and sugar. So 1 tablespoon of kosher salt. You could use sea salt or another salt. This is just regular table sugar, another, let's say, tablespoon. It's really to your taste, but I find a tablespoon of each at this stage works well. Because sometimes the tomatoes out of the can are, well, all the time actually, they're bitter and they don't necessarily have a lot of sweetness, so you want to add that. So I'm adding about 6 cloves of fresh garlic. I'm going to mince them in. You want to do this at this stage of the roasting and not early on, because sometimes garlic, if you do cook it for a long period of time, it can end up being a little bit bitter. So we're talking, halfway through the cooking process, another 2 or 3 hours in the roaster. So this is the time to add any garlic. I do not add Italian seasoning or basil or oregano at this stage. For storage, this is all I add, and then if I do want that mixture, I add that while I'm cooking with it. So this is just for storage. Alright, so we'll finish off adding the minced garlic. Again, this is optional. It's just to your taste. So we'll stir that in. And just scrape the sides. And this is important. You want to make sure that your lid is not completely on, with leave some openings, because now you're going to reduce it down. You're going to try to cook off some of that water content or moisture content. So this is after another 3 hours of cooking, and this is pretty much perfect consistency for how I like it. But if you want it a little bit thinner, obviously don't roast for as long. If you want it thicker, go a little bit longer, okay? But this is what I was kind of looking for. And I did do a taste test here, and I felt it needed a little bit more sugar and salt, probably like half a teaspoon of each. It wasn't a lot, but I thought it just needed a little bit to be added. But again, it's your own personal preference on the taste. So stir that in. And then we're pretty much going to move on to the next step. I think I let it go for another 15-20 minutes. And then I'll show you the next step. But these electric roasters are great because you can kind of move them around the house where you need to have them. Okay, so here you can see I have the sauce tray sitting there, and these are large freezer bags, which I just showed. And you're going to need a bowl and a 1 liter jar or 1 pint jar. So what I'm basically doing is measuring out 1 liter into a jar, and then I'm going to transfer that sauce into the freezer bags and then freeze them. Now you could do into jars and then do the water bath method and do it that way, but I'm kind of don't have the jars because I a few weeks ago had done fresh tomato sauce, so I'm going to freeze this. So yeah, I'm using the 1 liter jar as kind of a template. And you'll see I put the bag inside the bowl. It's pretty much the easiest way to do it. If you were to try to hold the bag and pour at the same time, it'd be a bit of a challenge. So try to pour it directly in. Don't get any on the lip of the bag. So these are the Ziploc style bag. And you want to push out as much air as you can get. And completely seal it off. And the reason a Ziploc bag works well is You can see you can spread it flat, and you can freeze them flat too, so they don't take up much room in the freezer. So you continue on using the 1 liter or 1 pint jar. The reason I do this as well is if I take the bag out of the freezer, I know there's exactly the amount that will fill a 1 liter or 1 pint jar. So it makes it easy, and you're not guessing the amounts. So you give it a shake to get some of the air out, and then push it down. Close it about 80% or so, push all the air out. Or as much as you can. You don't have to get all the air out. You're going to be using this sauce anyway in the next weeks and months out of the freezer, so just get as much as air out as you can and flatten it out. And here you can see I have a large bowl that I'm placing each bag in. And you just continue on. I found this method works the best for having a consistent amount. And again, you could just go directly into jars if you have the jars on hand and do a water bath method. So here you see in the bowl I have 6 1-liter bags, and then 2 jars, one's 1 full liter and half a liter. So that's the yield I get out of those 3 cans. And yeah, easy to store and a great tasting sauce. So I moved the bags into a freezer safe container. You could also directly put the sauce in containers into the freezer as well. So thanks for watching. I hope you try this method out, and it really gives a nice result. So please subscribe, and I'll see you for the next video. Thank you.